Hi, and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name is Angie, and today we are going to be talking about all the books I read in August. The first book that I read and finished in August was none other than The Striker by Anna Huang. I don't have a physical copy of this book because I actually borrowed it from my library. But if you are wondering what it's about, it follows Asher Donovan, who is a famous football player. And it is dual point of view. So the other point of view is Scarlett, who used to be a famous ballerina, but is now a teacher for ballet. And Asher has a feud with Scarlett's brother. Due to the feud, they end up getting in trouble and they are told that they must learn ballet for the summer. Of course, they are both against it, but they are actually being taught by none other than Scarlett. And Scarlett doesn't want to teach them as much as they don't want to learn from her. But when Asher meets Scarlett, it is kind of like love at first sight. He wants to take her out, he wants to date her, he wants to impress her, and obviously she's against it because this is her brother's biggest rival. I feel like this is also kind of another form of a billionaire romance. It is super cute and there's a representation for a hidden disability. I absolutely loved it, and in the first half I thought, oh man, this is gonna be a 4 to 5 star, but then it just kind of felt like it was dragging out. It is over 500 pages, I believe, and I ended up giving this a solid 3.5 stars. But if you're in the mood for a sports romance or a billionaire romance, millionaire romance, I don't know how you want to classify it, I think this would be a very good option for you. The second book that I read in August was a Kindle Unlimited rec, and unfortunately it was a DNF. This I thought was going to be like a 4 to 5 star read. I was so freaking excited for Hot for Hostage. It was sold as a mafia rom-com, and I thought this is going to be phenomenal. Unfortunately, as we're getting further into the book, I just felt like the main character was so naive and so dumb. And I also found it a little bit gross that the male main character saw her as a child, but once she revealed her age, he started crushing on her. I just thought that was really weird, and I didn't really like that. So I ended up DNFing this, I believe around 20-ish%. The third book that I read in August was Namesake by Adrienne Young. This is the final book in the duology of Fable. In Fable, we follow a girl named Fable, and she is abandoned on this island at a very young age. Her parents were some of the world's most famous ship traders, and the boat ended up getting destroyed and the mother ended up passing away, and the father just kicked her off on this island to fend for herself at a very young age. So she becomes something known as a dredger, which is where she's trying to find like rare seashells and stuff to make a living. And she has been raised and has been trying to work in this difficult and hard environment, and the story kind of progresses from there. I feel like there's a lot more action in Namesake, but I also just kind of felt that I wanted to get it over with. I think the story was very good, but I think personally it just wasn't the correct time for me to read this. I ended up rating this a 3 stars. The very next book I finished in August was Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. This story follows a girl named Jet who is violently attacked on Halloween night and finds out that she only has 7 days to live. In those 7 days, she decides she wants to find out who her killer is because, well, she has nothing else to live for. And with the help of her best friend Billy, they start to go on these adventures to discover who might be her killer. There are so many suspects and so many people that it could be, and I feel like I definitely didn't see it coming. I loved all the twists in here, and I feel like Jet was just such a comical main character. She definitely added to the thrilling aspect by introducing comedy. I absolutely love this one, and I actually rated it 5 stars. This is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. The next book I actually do have a physical copy of, but I misplaced it on my shelves. So if you see it in the background, don't judge me. But it is The Art of Catching Feelings. And it took me a minute to get into this one. And I think that was personally because I just read Not Quite Dead Yet, and it was literally phenomenal. But in The Art of Catching Feelings, we follow Daphne, who just signed her divorce papers, and she ends up going to a baseball game because her brother had given her some tickets, and she ends up getting drunk, and she heckles the baseball player. After saying a couple rude things to him, he actually ends up breaking down and sobbing, and obviously this is all caught on camera. And she leaves absolutely mortified, and the next day she sees it on the news. After freaking out a little bit, she decides to reach out to this baseball player to apologize and explain what happened. She types it up several times and eventually chooses one that looks the best and hits submit. Unbeknownst to her, he ends up replying, and then it occurs to her. She forgot to include the part in her apology that said, "I'm sorry." It ended up looking like a general apology where she was saying, "I'm sorry you've been heckled," instead of, "I'm sorry I did it." So at this point, she's too afraid to admit to him that it was her that did it, and they end up striking up a friendship. She is under a Bookstagram account, so her name on there is Ducky. They end up talking for a while back and forth, and he tries numerous times to get her to meet in person, and she's against it for obvious reasons. On the flip side, her sister-in-law actually works for this baseball team as a social media manager, and she's about to go into labor, and Daphne is actually forced to take her place and work for the baseball team. So it kind of is a love story, obviously, that goes from there. It is very interesting. I felt that the story was quite infuriating. I was mad that she wasn't admitting it when she had so many chances to, but then at the same time, I was really loving to see their relationship develop and shine. And by the end, I actually really loved this. I ended up rating it 4 stars. The next book I attempted to read, but it was unfortunately a DNF as well. I got this from my library, and it's called The Scattered Bones. I was really looking forward to it because I had heard a couple good reviews about it, but I was struggling to just understand what I was reading, and it felt like the timeline was backwards and didn't make sense. So pretty much we follow our female main character who has been trying to go through all these trials and tribulations to collect her love's bones. This is the crazy part. It details everything on the synopsis. It says that she wasn't supposed to fall in love with a man, and she did, and by that the gods ended up cursing her and killing him, and now she must retrieve all of his bones so that he doesn't eternally rest in a bad place or something like that. You open the story with her working to collect his bones. You don't see the backstory until almost halfway through the book. I spent over like a week and a half trying to push myself to read this, but I really couldn't get into it. Not only did it feel backwards, it was hard to understand. I couldn't understand certain characters' roles in this. I ended up DNFing it because I feel like if I didn't, it would have been a 1 star. And it's not all that long either. It's less than 300 pages, so it should have been a quick read, but I feel like I spent hours attempting to read this one. The next one was The Weaver Bride, and this one actually doesn't come out until September 30th, but this one I am highly anticipating. I am definitely going to be grabbing myself a copy of this one. We follow Lovett, who is a silk witch, but if you're not married by a certain age, you end up in a place called the Cloisters, and that is kind of where all the unwed witches go to kind of just work till the day they die. and she wants to avoid this, but she doesn't have the money and prestige to be married to a weaver, so she ends up dyeing her hair and hiding in plain sight. She steals from the rich, and one day she's caught by none other than Elliot Lear. Elliot gives her a proposition though. He says, I can get you into a competition to marry the Weaver King, and even if you lose, you'll have your pick of suitors. But this is only if you discover why the previous winner died, which is none other than his sister. She agrees to this, and as the trials take place, it is so fun and so mysterious and kind of scary at times, worrying about the main character. I absolutely loved to see how this book went and all of the things that took place, and at some points I was like, is this a love triangle? Who is she actually into? Who is the true love interest gonna be? I loved it, and like a true romantasy, you don't really know what's going on until the end. I ended up rating this one 4.5 stars, and I am so ready for the next book, but the first one hasn't even been published, so there's obviously no date yet. The next one was actually a reread for me, and that was An Ember in the Ashes by Sahaba Tahir. I actually didn't remember anything of this because I read it for the first time when it first came out back in like 2014, 2015. I was in high school at the time, and in high school I rated this 5 stars. Well, clearly I have taste because my new rating, even after reading so many other fantasies and romantasies, was 4.5. And in the opening scene, we open up with Leia's brother being arrested, and this being the only family she has from this point forward, so she wants to free him, and she ends up teaming up with the rebels. And the rebels send her in as a slave, and she goes through a lot of torture and a lot of terrible things. On the other hand, we have Elias, which is one of the masks. He is a soldier. He is one of the best soldiers, but he is not really free either. He doesn't want to partake in this, but if he leaves, he will threaten being killed in a very, very horrendous way. He ends up meeting Leia, and some things go down from there. It is high stakes. There is trials throughout this whole thing. A lot of twists that you don't see coming. It is so, so good. And I cannot wait to pick up the second book. I don't think I ever read the second book. I think at the time this was the only one out. And now I'm so excited to read on and find out what happens in this series. I believe it is a 4-book series. The next book I read was actually gifted to me by NetGalley as well, and this is because this book is being republished or traditionally published, and that is Fairytale by Veronica Lancet. In Fairytale, we follow a girl named Darcy, and she was raised in an orphanage. Her mother died at a very young age, and she never knew who her father was. She actually ended up becoming an English teacher at the same place that raised her, and after some time, she gets a letter that says her father has passed away and that she is eligible to get $1 million inheritance. And for an orphan with no money, this sounds phenomenal. After talking to her roommate and talking to the nuns at the school where she worked, she ends up deciding to go, realizing that this is actually legit. And after making it to Fairytale, some weird things happen along the way, and things that should never take place in the real world are happening in this small town. This book is really hard to describe without giving away any spoilers, but along the way she meets a man named Caleb Hale, and with him she tries to solve what's going on, but there's these weird illusions happening too where she's like, can I actually trust him? And then there's another man she's seeing in her dreams, and she doesn't really know who he is either. And it's a wild ride. And in the first 20 to 40% of this book, I was absolutely loving it. It's described as a mixing pot or a melting pot of genres. It has fantasy elements, horror elements, and paranormal. 2 of those I never read, the paranormal and the horror. And when I realized that, I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna hate this. But as I read on, I was like, why have I never read this? The first 40% I was in love with. After that point, it kind of got a little bit gross with how easily forgiving the main character was of some terrible things that happened to her. And then once, you know, some things came to light, it was easier. But to me, one, it was so insta-lovey. Two, some questions never got answered. And three, it was so slow. It felt so surface level too. Like, we weren't going into depth at all with the story, yet it was 732 pages. And to me, that's just a little bit crazy. And unfortunately, I ended up rating Fairytale a 2.5. The last book that I read in August was A Chateau of Echoes. And I love this cover. I think it is so stunning. But unfortunately, the contents aren't the best either. So in A Chateau of Echoes, we follow Frederick Farmer, who has opened an inn, a bed and breakfast, pretty much after her husband has passed away. And when they were doing some renovations, they ended up finding some journals and some diaries of a girl named Alex that lived thousands of years ago. So now, because of the historic elements of this bed and breakfast, she can turn away anybody she wants and charge any price she wants because all the rich and wealthy want to stay here. She ends up only accepting like 1 or 2 people every so many months and then just traveling the rest of the year, which sounds great. She's a recluse. The story opens with her finding a letter in the mail from an American man asking to stay there for 6 months and write a story about Alex's life. She immediately throws it in the trash. Ain't no way she is going to let somebody stay there for 6 months. But the next day, this man ends up calling and he pretty much begs her, and she feels too bad to say no, so they agree to a 1-month stay. 1 month progresses into 2, then 3, then so on. We followed this book over the course of a year, where she at first really doesn't get along with him, and it's not even till the 200-page mark that we really get any depth to this male main character, which the book is only 380 pages, so that's a little crazy to me. It just felt like the same scene happened over and over and over. Like, she would wake up, she would cook, maybe chat a little bit, go to bed. Same thing happened over and over. And yes, being a chef is her passion, but I didn't want to read about her cooking over and over and over. Once we finally were introduced to the male main character, he was insufferable. He didn't have a redeeming quality about him. I didn't even think at the end where they officially got together that they should have been. Like, even in the end, he was ignoring her to write. And I really truly didn't see how Alex really tied into the story at all. So unfortunately for me, this was another 2.5. And that was all the books that I read in August. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you decided that you were going to pick up some of my 5 and 4-star reads. And just a disclaimer, even the books that I didn't rate the best may be 5 stars for you. So don't hesitate to pick them up if they do sound interesting to you. I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.